Welcome to the fourth video in the Outdoor Women Lead series, a collaborative project between Maine Outdoor School and Women for Healthy Rural Living. I'm Hazel Stark from Maine Outdoor School, and today we're going to focus on plant identification, and we'll identify some common Maine plants together. The first step to building confidence with plant identification, which is especially critical if you're interested in eating any wild plants that you have around you, is to simply get to know the differences between plants. I think the best way to do this is to really dive in hands-on, drawing plants, getting to know their differences, labeling their differences, starting with a common plant like a dandelion and actually drawing it out and paying attention to the details, not just saying yellow flower, but paying attention to all of the different parts, their shapes and their relationships to each other. For younger children especially, but this is also fun for adults, creating leaf rubbings of different types of plants and their leaves is a great place to start. What I'd suggest to try your first leaf rubbing, which also can make some really nice stationery too, is to select a couple of different leaves that look really different to you. So I've selected this leaf, which I happen to know is an oak leaf, and this leaflet from a fern. All you have to do to make a leaf rubbing is you get a hard surface, so I have a clipboard, and you put the leaf upside down, so the more veiny side tends to be on the bottom side of the leaf. Flip those leaves upside down and put them underneath a sheet of paper, but on top of the hard surface. And then with a crayon, and you don't have to have the color accurate, I have a sort of red-violet color and a green color. All you have to do is simply press down really hard and color all over where that leaf is on top of the paper that is on top of the leaf. So here are my couple of leaf rubbings. I am always amazed every time I do this how beautifully they turn out, especially leaves that have really thick and obvious veins. So this would allow me to actually have a picture of these leaves that's pretty accurate and be able to count the number of lobes on the oak leaf, pay attention to the direction of the veins, compare how many little leaflets are on a given fern. And that's a really good thing to start paying attention to, counting the parts and noticing their differences and relationships with each other. Once you've started to familiarize yourself with the differences between plants, whether that's through a bunch of drawing practices or leaf rubbings, things like that, next you want to start familiarizing yourself with the vocabulary that gives names for those different characteristics of plants. So for example, when you're looking at a leaf, it's important to notice whether it has lobes or not. A couple of common Maine plants that have lobes are maple leaves and oak leaves. The next thing to pay attention to is whether the edges of that leaf are serrated or jagged like a steak knife, or if they're really smooth. And then maybe the most important thing to notice about a leaf to get you started is where they're growing relative to each other. So are those leaves growing opposite each other, like this, or are they growing alternate to each other? There are some plants that you really cannot identify without being able to take a close look at its flowers. So getting to know the language of flower parts is pretty critical to identifying certain plants. So getting to know what the stamens are, counting how many there are, petals, how many petals there are, how symmetrical the flower is overall, whether the flowers grow in little bundles or whether those flowers are spread out singly over a plant. And that leads into paying attention to the plants around you and their phenology. So when do they flower? When do they fruit? Do they flower or fruit? Those are really critical things to know in terms of the span of the year. How does that plant change? When does it change? And what are the features that change? So once you've gotten to know the differences between plants and the names for those differences, then you can really start using some resources to help you identify the plants that you have around you. In our entomology video, we showed how to use a dichotomous key to identify insects. And dichotomous keys exist in most field guides for plants as well. So if you want to learn how to use a dichotomous key, definitely check out our entomology exploration video for a pretty thorough example of how to use those. But just like with insect guides, plant guides, you really need to get a good plant field guide that is specific to your region. So if you're a book person, field guides can work really well for you with their mix of photos and descriptions and dichotomous keys to help get you there. Learning from a person in your area that really knows the plants well in your area is probably the best way to learn. You can definitely learn on your own using field guides or websites to support you, but really hearing from a human being can really help out a lot. So even though we're not in person together right now, I'm going to go through a few common Maine plants that you can try to identify the next time you're outside with some tips about how I know to identify them. Getting to know your trees is a really good place to start, especially if you're new to plant identification. This is our first very common Maine tree to learn today. What do you notice about it? The first thing that's obvious is that it is a tree that has leaves that are needles. This is an evergreen tree. And as a hint, since you can't touch this one right here, if you take any one needle and try to roll it between your fingers, you'll find that it won't roll. It's flat. So this tree is a balsam fir. I selected a short one to look at because you can actually reach the needles and feel that they're pretty soft and they don't roll between your fingers. Spruce trees are another kind of common evergreen tree that we have here, but they're very sharp to the touch, and when you take one needle between your fingers and roll them, it rolls easily because the cross-section of spruce tree needles are quite square. Here is a common forest floor plant in Maine. This plant has bunches of red berries in August. The leaves have parallel veins and tend to grow in 4s or 6s. And so those little bunches of red berries on the forest floor are a good clue that this plant is bunchberry. So this plant is a great example of an oppositely arranged plant. These big fat leaves that are almost cartoon heart shape grow opposite each other, and they also have really deep veins and clusters of flowers and berries. Right now it's early August, and so the fruit of this plant is just getting ripe, so it'll get even redder in the coming weeks. So when you see a plant that has big fat round leaves like this, thick obvious veins, clusters of flowers or fruit, and has opposite arrangement, especially in forests in Maine, you're probably looking at hobblebush. Maine is a very plant-rich place, but once you start noticing the differences in all the green around you, you'll start noticing how many different plant species are all around us, providing oxygen for us to breathe, providing habitat and food for so many different living things, preventing erosion in the soil, and so many other benefits. Thank you so much for watching the OWL series with Maine Outdoor School and Women for Healthy Rural Living. Be sure to check out the OWL website for links to our other videos, a blog for women, and lots of other resources that can help you in your journey to developing your outdoor and naturalist skills.